Welcome to Veritus Group's webinar, Depleted, Overwhelmed, Start Setting Boundaries. Today's webinar features Karen Kendrick, Veritus Group's Director of Learning, and Wes Savants, an executive coach and teacher who specializes in helping professionals develop personal resilience and cultivate emotional intelligence. We are in for a great treat today because Karen and Wes will share their expertise around how to take back control of your life by refocusing how we approach boundaries. At Veritus, we've worked with thousands of fundraisers and nonprofit leaders, and we have an incredibly difficult and you have an incredibly difficult and demanding job. You are also generous, compassionate people who want to help the world. And those qualities are critical to your work, but they can lead into a trap of feeling afraid to say no, which is what we'll be diving in today. So I'm going to hand it over to Karen and Wes and introduce themselves at today's webinar presentation. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And Wes, would you introduce yourself?
I'll be glad to. I'm Wes Avance. I am happy to be here. As Jeff mentioned, most of my career has been spent in coaching and other leadership development aspects, especially in the aspect of resilience, dealing with burnout, how to set boundaries, emotional intelligence. And I got to tell you, over the last 90 days especially, this has just become a hot topic. And everyone is feeling the price that we're paying for the events of the last year in one form or another. So this is a very relevant conversation. I'm excited to be here and to have that. Karen?
Thank you, Wes. It's great to work with you again. And my background's in doing everything in the nonprofit sector, program side, fundraising side, worked in the university. And then I also have a background in counseling and coaching certifications and working with leaders. So I get to bring all my favorite things together today and really looking at how we can be more resilient in all that we're doing. And I love this topic because I have been terrible in my life at setting boundaries, and it's been a lifelong journey of really learning how to start doing that. And it's been a step-by-step process. So I know I'm learning by putting this presentation together, and hope we can bring something for you today as well. So just for a moment, pop in the chat box. What are some things that you think that have made it particularly depleting and overwhelming for you all? And what are some things you all are feeling? So put those in the chat box while I just keep going here for a moment, and then Jeff can jump in with a few of those. So the objectives for today, we want to understand, talk about what are the challenges we have in setting boundaries. We want to talk about love, how love leads the way, and self-compassion. And we want to really look at strategies. Everything we do here at Veritus is all about how do we give you tools to really take something and apply it and make it a part of your life. So please do so. So Jeff, what are some things you're seeing in the chat box?
Well, so far I've not seen anything.
Okay. Well, pop those in and Jeff can come back with those as we go along.
Great. You know, while we're thinking about this topic, I'm reminded of a story. It's a true story. It happened just a few weeks ago. I heard something I have never heard before in my life. We have a grandson that just turned 5. We've kept him over weekends regularly as he's been growing. And typically at bedtime, it's always a challenge. You know, we have dinner and then he didn't want to quit playing, you know, and so it's an ordeal to try to move him toward bedtime. This particular occasion, just a few weeks ago, we had dinner. It had been a long day, I have to admit. And he looked up at us and he said, "I'm ready for bed now." So after we got over the shock, everything went really nicely. But that left quite an impression on me, because my takeaway from that was, do I have the self-awareness that my 5-year-old grandson had to be able to realize when I needed to tend to my own needs? And then did I have the courage to actually trade getting more done for going ahead and doing what I knew I really needed to do? So that's part of what we're talking about today when we talk about setting boundaries. Most of us fall into this same category. If you're on this program today, then probably one or more of these is going to resonate with you. Typically, we know we've got an issue with insufficient boundaries at work when we're feeling like we're never catching up, we're never getting it all done, and trying harder just is not working. And it's unfortunate, but the more success we have at what we do, then the more responsibilities we're given and the higher our expectations are set, often in our own mind. And so we can easily find ourselves on this nonstop quest to get everything done and to live up to expectations. And so we try harder and harder and harder, and we get to a point where we realize this is not serving us well in the long run. Another aspect of that is a fear component. If I'm not nice, if I don't say yes, if I don't go along with what they want me to do, then they're not going to like me as much. I'm not going to be as successful. All my well-being is going to go away because I'm not getting what I really want, and people aren't treating me like I hope they do. And underneath that, it can be some people like me. I just hate letting people down. I love the joy of being able to fulfill. But when we realize that that's not working either, usually that shows up, not just exhaustion, but that fear often creates resentment. When at some point I realize, I don't have a life. Other people have my life. And that resentment feeds burnout, and that is a downward spiral once we start going in that direction. It's hard to pull a nose up when we're going down that direction. Another way that feels like is taking responsibility for others. And as a result, we tend to carry a lot of negative feelings because we're not always able to make others feel good. That may be liking us, or it may be doing what we want them to do, or it may be just this natural tendency to want to make others feel good. And the more I assume responsibility for others, the more energy it's going to take. And so it really becomes an energy issue. We work to the point where we are so depleted that we just want to throw up our hands and walk away from that relationship, or from even trying to do that with anyone in extreme cases. And the other aspect of that that often shows up, and certainly these are not all of them. I started to say these are not exhausted, but we're already talking about exhaustion. So this is
don't use that word.
the limit of what it looks like. But the other one that's really common is we finally just get to the point where we don't feel healthy or happy. Especially, we notice that there's just less joy in our work, joy in our lives in general. Emotional exhaustion, as well as other kinds of exhaustion, will take a toll. In November of 2019, the New York Times had an article in it that said something about increasing exhaustion and sleep is not the answer. And the article talked about how positive emotions and negative emotions drain us of our energy. And so whatever we're experiencing, we may be having a great deal of success, but if we're failing to take care of ourselves and set appropriate boundaries, it will show up, we will become exhausted, and more sleep is not the answer. We have to do something different. So that's where we're at, and what we look to as recognizing where we're feeling this kind of lack of boundaries. So I'll defer to you again, Jeff. Are there things showing up yet that we need to address before we move on?
I hope so. However, we're having a little technical difficulty on my end. I cannot read any questions or chats from my viewpoint. So
very good. We'll put the tape across your mouth.
Yeah, I basically am going to have to do that. Somehow I didn't get the right credentials or something, but I know there's probably some good ones. So if you have the ability to see those, that would be great.
So great. Jeff, let me see if I can get out of presenter mode here and give that to you maybe.
Great. And while you do that, we're just assuming that if you made the time to attend this webinar today, that some of this is resonating with you. And ideally, you would be connecting with us in this topic far enough upstream that it's not already a crisis. A true story, I have a physician client who for 20 years worked on one coast in the United States, built this great practice, moved into great leadership roles. As a matter of fact, he began accepting all kinds of responsibilities for his group and outside of his practice. And it got to the point where his life was falling apart because he wasn't taking care of himself. And it was such an extreme case where he literally had to quit that practice, move to the other coast, literally the other coast of the US, and start from scratch because he could not find a way out. People had so branded him as a person to go to, and he was so capable and did such a great job, but there was not the capacity that he felt at that time to back out of that situation. And so, that's an excellent warning that we need to be able to recognize early on and upfront as much as possible to learn what those warning signs are. So we'll talk about some of those.
Okay, I've got access now to a bunch of them.
Yeah.
All right, so this goes back to your first thing you were asking about. They're not so much questions, but what's going on. One person just wrote expectations, no separation between workspace and home space. The CEO still wants to meet daily and on camera. Re-entry into whatever this new normal will look like as we emerge from the pandemic. So this is someone's anxiety. Everyone is doing so much more to get the mission done during COVID-19. It's hard to be the one that says no. The blurring of work-life balance, always another email to respond to, another donor to speak with from home. Can't say no to people when they ask me to do something. Someone said, donors know I'm not traveling, so expect me to be available 24/7. You have nothing else to do, right? Intense responsibility for securing funds to keep the organization going. Unrealistic goals. Results of isolation and absence of team presence and team building in person. Working from home means working all the time. Donors who want to do impossible things with their gifts. Balancing different coworkers, family members, communication styles. That's a big one. Not being able to meet donors face to face. Taking an additional administration responsibility due to staff being repurposed to other departments. I mean, it is going on and on. How many do you want me to keep going? I mean, there is a lot.
Maybe we should pause before it gets too depressing.
Well, I mean, at least it gives, one thing that's good by naming these things is that people are like, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a ton of people here all over the world today, right now, saying all of this. And I'm resonating with these. It's overwhelming to work virtually all the time because I have to self-motivate. On the other side, I have too many Zoom meetings and they drain me. Pressure to return to my office by the board, heedless of my increased productivity at home. That's going to happen with a lot of people. I bet a lot of people are resonating with that, is that now here we are at home and we've now developed a way to do this. And a lot of people are finding they're more productive. In fact, I think if you did an 8 hours in the office, it's the equivalent to probably 4 hours in the home because you're not distracted all the time.
If you don't have 3 kids in school behind you the whole time.
No, I know that's true, but
or parents.
It feels like you can be more productive actually at home. It goes on. How do you tactively communicate to leadership that you need a bit less pressure and a bit more support?
Well, let's dive in, because I love what you said, Jeff. To me, it's like, wow, I'm not alone. And I think we're all facing a really unique opportunity right now to step into, how do I set boundaries in a healthy way? Because so much is changing, right? And I'm even trying to adjust, and what's the new normal? And so let's dive in here a little bit more, Wes, and see if we hopefully can give you all some tools and some permission to set more healthy boundaries and take more care of yourself in these really challenging situations.
Great. I wanted a word that caught my attention, especially Jeff. And I certainly don't mean to make light of any of those because we're all feeling it. And the word that caught my attention was the word isolation. Is we are often contacting more people than ever before digitally, and yet all of us are feeling increased isolation. And every day that goes by, that gets more.
Yeah.
For most of us, especially in the nonprofit world, this is about being with people, and that's tough. And so the starting place for this, in view of the fact that we're having all these feelings, the very first step has to be a clear vision of where I want to be, not just regret from where I am or wishing I was in a different place. Underneath this is the principle, it's easier to say no if there's a deeper yes burning inside. And so for us to cultivate, to really invest some time and cultivate and nurture a clear vision of what we would love to see for our future, then that power of that vision can fuel us to have the energy to set appropriate boundaries and to have the courage to say no and feel good about that. The attractive power of this positive vision is really what's needed. As long as we're over feeling all the negative feelings, then it's easy just to look for relief, and that's not enough to fuel the kind of change that we're looking at. Let's go to the definition, Karen. Let's look at the next slide.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to share, Wes, is one thing that I love is setting a one word for a year. What is your one word? And for a couple years, my word was ease. I wanted to have more ease in my life. And it didn't mean that my stress or my work level or anything was going away, but how I interacted with my whole life, I wanted to have more ease. And just because I said this year, and I would tell people that and tell friends that, I would find my way to really interacting with more ease. And I look back and I say, wow, I do live with more ease now. So think about what your one word might be. And you can pop that in the chat box. What would be your one word this year that you would like to embody and start thinking about what that intention might be?
You know, I think that's such an outstanding suggestion. I really like that. Let's try to return to that and unpack that again later on before we sign off, because I think you've got a lot on the ball there.
Yeah, I'm getting a bunch.
Great. Yeah, let's go ahead and save them because I'd really like to spend some time on that. But we'll do a little.
Okay. Here's some one words.
Okay, I love it.
Joy, build, me, grace, peace, balance, collaboration, centered, balance, courage, calm, realistic,
Beautiful, beautiful.
gentle, in control, trust, fun, enoughness, preservation, and empathy.
I love it. I love it. I love all those. That's a great context. We will nurture those as we go through this program today. So there's a definition that you see on the slide in front of you. And since this is going to be an audio recording, we'll simply say that boundaries at work are the limits you create to protect yourself from overcommitting to others and protecting the gift that you bring. So we just want to acknowledge that there's a wide range of boundaries that we need to set in all kinds of aspects in the workplace. Most of what we're talking about in this moment is this protecting yourself from overcommitting. And healthy boundaries just fundamentally allow us to freely and joyfully serve others and ourselves without experiencing the oppressive feelings that we have overcommitted and that we have to hurry through the process of doing things for others or for ourselves. That constant pressure to hurry is debilitating over time. And boundaries are actually, I would say always, and most importantly, boundaries are what we say to ourselves, not necessarily what we say to others, but they're what we say to ourselves so that we can prepare ourselves to be calm and confident and clear about what will work for the greater good. That means it will allow us to feel like we're bringing the best we can on a long-term basis, and we'll allow everyone else to be able to work toward the greater good. Once we've gone to that place internally, then it allows us to communicate with others about those boundaries in ways that we can show respect and gratitude, as well as confidence and clarity. So that's when we're talking about boundaries. Yes, it is guidelines, and it is something that we share with others, but the core of that is the talk that I'm having inside my head.
I love that, Wes. And for me, it's like that. How I even think about and experience boundaries has changed over time. So at first, it was just learning to even say no, because the only time I said no was when I'd had it, I was angry, and I did not say no eloquently or well. And so then it was learning to do it from a more grounded, present, authentic, good space. And then it was, oh, it's not just saying no, it's order like the compass. It's also like, who do I want to become, and how do I want to live my life, and what do I want to bring to the world? And then sort of being in the driver's seat versus just stopping things from coming my way. So I love the journey around boundaries, and do see that when we decide we want to work on this, I know for myself, I've really seen progress and have much more to learn and go as well.
I like that. And one of the words mentioned earlier was grace. Because this is such a journey, we have to have, and realistic was another word. Those are such great words, because we have to realize if I'm steering my ship in a different direction, that's going to be a slow change. And so I have to be very patient, realistic, and give myself a lot of grace while I make that change. So, good comment.
Yeah, so let love lead the way. I think in the nonprofit sector, we think about, we have a passion for our mission, whether it's environment or animals or a political thing or, education piece, whatever it might be, we have a passion and love for what we're doing. We want to make a difference. And, it seems like in every faith, there is a teaching around love others as you love yourself. And that sounds really nice, but it's really different to actually embody that. Like, I do have to really love myself. I can only give what I already have. And so we want to talk a little bit about that self-compassion, and that sense that, oh, I do actually deserve to take up space and have choices, and be able to guide and lead in ways as well. And so the interesting thing that I love Brene Brown. You all probably, she's got great. If you're interested in her stuff on boundaries, go listen to her podcast. She has so much there available. And it was fascinating. She did a 13-year research project on the most compassionate people. So these are like priests, nuns, monks, social workers, people who you would imagine like are the most compassionate. And she was looking for, what is the one sort of string that ties them all together? What is that one thing that is similar? And she thought it would be their faith or some kind of value. And what she learned was shocking. And the one piece that tied them all together is they had boundaries of steel. And so she went back and she was like asking them about it. And their comment was, yeah, I don't subject myself to the abuse of others, because then I'm depleted. I have nothing else to give. And to be a compassionate person, to give compassion, to give empathy, I have to start with myself. And to do that, I need to set boundaries. So if you're having, we want, a lot of this is like giving ourselves permission, right? So remember, the most compassionate people that do so much good in the world are people that set those boundaries of steel.
I love it. I have to confess that this has been a long struggle for me. And Renee really does nail that in a big way. And underneath so much of this reflects the title in the slide in front of you: Boundaries Allow Us to Be Human. There have been times in my life, fortunately it's been a while back, when I was just almost obsessed with time management. And throughout my life, too much of my time has been spent trying to be like a machine, almost to deny my humanity. And now I wouldn't have thought that in terms of I connect with people well, and I like connecting with people, but the way I treat myself was too much like a machine. And there have been too many occasions where I've blown past limits that should have been in place to take care of myself. And there's always a price tag to pay for that. And it helped me so much to adopt a phrase that I learned a number of years ago that reflects the reality of the natural world. It's just 3 words: rhythms, cycles, and seasons. That everything in the natural world operates on rhythms, cycles, and seasons, from light waves to, well, just the seasons. And that's part of the beauty. And the change and the variation is not only healthy, but it's a part of the beauty of who we are. Along with that, closely tied, is the idea of perfectionism. We want so badly to show up perfectly for other people, but yet in human relationships, this killed me to learn this. Perfectionism repels imperfections, because none of us, we all know we're not perfect, and when we're around someone that appears to be perfect, we either think they don't need us or they won't like us. And so this idea of being fully human is really important to our courage to realize that it is not selfish for me to say no and make time for myself. And that's the pouring in part. I have to invest in me. Another phrase that I heard that has impacted my life: our mind moves at the speed of technology, but our emotions move at the speed of agriculture. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I can't get angry in a moment or happy or laugh in a moment, but those deeper emotions that come from meaningful experiences, or the emotions that are tied to my values or my aspirations, those move slowly. And when I have consistently been allowing those to be abused because I've not had good boundaries, then feelings of failure, feelings of inadequacy, feelings of resentment are slow to change. And so the key is to give myself enough time regularly to process what's going on in me and in the people around me. So let's go to the next slide, Karen. That helps me reframe the idea of saying no. For some of us, certain personality types in particular, the idea of saying no just seems wrong, whether or not the job sets us up for that. But to understand the beauty of our humanity and to have the courage to respect myself and others means that I'm going to reframe saying no as a statement of respect and appreciation for you. I respect you enough to believe that you can hear me say no and still be okay. I appreciate you enough to say it in a way that's gracious, but also the fact that I know that you care about me. And so taking care of myself and declining something can be an act of mutual respect. And if you are someone who does not have the capacity to say no very well, then the greatest gift I can give you is to model appropriate boundaries. So there are many different ways I can reframe that, but that will be key, so that the story that's playing in my head is, this is the gift I give. It's saying no. Where do you want to go from there, Karen?
I love that, Wes. And I just want to add too that it's saying no, then it's also figuring out what you need, right? I know when I first started saying no, I didn't even know what I needed. I hadn't really learned to tune in, to listen to what my needs were. And so, we'll model some ways of saying no, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one thought coming to my mind right now is, for a lot of you all out there trying to reframe with a boss, right? Responsibilities. Is there too much on your plate that's taking you away from donors? Too much on your plate, period. How do you come to a boss? And I know in my past, I would have probably done something like, wow, this stuff's really taking a lot of time from my donors. Some little side comment, right? Or, whoa, I'm working 10 hours a day. and hoping that my boss would listen to that or ask me more questions or try to help me. And then my boss probably like, wow, I guess she's not using good time management well, or who knows what they're thinking, right? And learning to sit down and really think about reframing the no as, I want to do a good job. I want to have time to connect with my donors. I want to be present and a whole healthy person with my donors. And so how do I sit down and think through, what is the difference it would make for the donors if I had more time to focus on them? And then looking at, what am I doing that is pulling me away from that? Make a list of all those things and how much time do I actually have a week to focus on donors? And then coming to my boss in a really proactive way and saying, I'd love to talk to you about this because this is what I want. I want to have time with donors, connect with donors, really serve their needs, connect their hearts to the mission. And this is what's taking me away from that. So can we talk about a way to maybe shift some of that around so that I can really be more successful? So sometimes it's saying no to something, and sometimes it's also like renegotiating what the expectations are.
Right on target.
All right, I love the word purposeful. We're in this amazing experiment of being human. I like stepping back a moment, like, wow, this is kind of interesting, right? Being human. And none of us are getting out of this alive, right? I love the app We Croak. It sends you reminders like 5 times a day that you're going to die. And it's so great because it's like, oh yeah, I'm not here forever. Like, who do I want to be? And what do I want to contribute? And what do I want my life to be like? It's a great reminder in that I do have choices in all of that. And so I like the word purposeful. So what isn't working and what needs to change? One thing I love that I've learned is that being a very emotional person, I didn't think they were very positive, but I've learned that my emotions are such a positive gift and my body is such a positive gift because all of that is information, right? So I'll notice if I'm having a hard time breathing, my neck might feel shut down. I might feel just tight everywhere, emotionally irritated, overwhelmed. I want to cry all the time. Put in the chat box some things that your body or your emotions tell you when it's not working. So go ahead and pop some of those things in. What are some things that it's telling you when they're not working? And so what's so helpful is to start learning to tune in, right? Tune into myself and be, oh, okay, something's up. So how do I take a moment and pause and really process what is causing that? Is it that I'm in my 50s and it's menopause, or is it actually life? And looking at how do I break that down, look at it, think about it, and what other choices do I have in that process? Because it's a great reminder to us that it's not working. It sounds like a lot of y'all are pretty aware it's not working. And so sometimes when we're trucking along in life, we don't notice that.
There's quite a bit of feedback here.
Yeah, what are folks saying, Jeff?
Depression and fatigue, heart palpitations, a flight mode at my desk, procrastination, distraction, apathy, tension headaches, my concentration goes, irritable, overactive, tense, anxious, tense shoulders, perpetual state of flight or fight mode, which for me means daily crying.
Been there.
Trouble sleeping, terrible stomach problems and grinding my teeth into dust. I get so overwhelmed I stop functioning and can only sleep. Pounding heart, fragile emotions, feeling like I'm on a knife's edge with patience. Sore shoulders and neck, anxious feelings when I get irritated at the kids and the dog. Stress eating, can't think straight. Spend too much time tuning out with things like phone and games. My body just collapses, exhaustion. Hamster wheel to-do list. I mean, there is a lot of stuff here. You want me to keep going?
No, that's good, Jeff. And I want to mention that that, what we're talking about today are tools to help us set boundaries, but there's also times also to be checking in, getting your system checked. Is my whole cortisol, is my whole system depleted? Do I need to get some help with my physician? Do I need to talk to a counselor? Do I need to get some wisdom? And I would recommend all of that. And just when you're in those places and you're trying some of these things Wes and I talk about and it's not working, that you really need to think about reaching out for some additional help, because we can get so depleted we can't bring our system back by ourselves in that process. Thank you, Jeff. Love you all. There's a lot going on. So let's step back just for a minute about why we have trouble expressing and enforcing our boundaries, right? And where does this come from? And I know for me, a lot of it was my upbringing. It was all about it was a religious upbringing, and a lot of it was about, being a good, kind, loving person, was giving. I had no boundaries setting modeled. And I was thinking back to the women that were probably talked about as problematic, or women that actually set some boundaries. And the women that were sort of thought was, oh, they're so wonderful, were ones that were so self-sacrificing in an unhealthy way. And so learned all of these messaging around setting boundaries meant you were bad, right? Meant you were selfish. And I'd love you all to put in the chat box, what are some messages, indirect or direct, that you got around why it's not okay to set boundaries? Because I think it's really important for us to get clear, what is that subconscious tape playing inside of our heads, right? And Wes, you want to talk about this some more as well?
Yeah, the stories that we tell ourselves are so powerful, and most of those were formed when we were quite young. And more and more research is seeming to indicate they were formed from nonverbal communication much more than formal communication. And we tend to just put those in our backpack, as it were, and then march on through life. And we develop coping mechanisms, and especially if we have a degree of success, because not having boundaries will often lead to increasing success. I like the high jump metaphor. The more you jump higher, the higher they raise the bar. You jump over that, they raise the bar again, and it never ends until you fail. And so there's some reasons why we have trouble with that. My well-being depends upon what other people think of me in so many different ways. So it's a natural, appropriate response that's healthy until it's not. And there's really the challenge, is when is something that's good? How do we recognize when that is turning out to be too much, when we need to turn that down? And that can be really challenging.
So first, I just want to say, have some self-compassion for yourself for having boundary issues. Like, don't beat yourself up about that, because that's a lot of us, right? And so, like, okay, I understand. I got a lot of that in my upbringing. This is what I've believed, and let me think about how I can move forward. And when I see myself sneaking around doing sideways things, not being authentic because I haven't set boundaries, then say, well, there I go. Identify it and be self-compassionate, because it's a journey of really shifting a whole way of surviving and getting attention and love that we grew up with in the process.
I like that. And, I'm thinking, I'm looking at the clock and thinking, maybe we want to just go ahead and jump into start talking about what are some ways that we can do to really chip away at that.
Yes.
Those
Yes.
kinds of ways of thinking. And the first one really is becoming aware. And honestly, I don't think we can do that by ourselves well. Each of us as humans have the capacity, and I'm going to say this, I hope this isn't too offensively, but we have the capacity to lie to ourselves so well that it just doesn't feel like a lie. If we say things like, well, I have to do that. I don't. And it's not really that bad, because, and you can fill in the blanks, but asking other people, or at least one other person that knows us well, also cares about us, to join in that conversation can really help. Just an example that I'm not proud about, but I remember a number of years ago when my loving wife sat me down and looked at me straight in the eyes, and she said, Wes, do you realize that every time you say yes to someone, you're saying no to me? Now, she is not a selfish person, but she recognized and called me on the fact that I had blown through boundaries. I had the best of intentions, but the truth really hurt, and involving others is really important in that. having said that, I want to add one more, and it's the opposite. It's spending time, unhurried time to reflect. My preferred way is journaling because it slows my hand down, it slows my thoughts down. And if I do it regularly, I don't feel the pressure to be profound every day. Okay, it's just a habit. And every now and then, it's transformative. So it just I'm going to read just a few lines from one of my journal entries that just happened to have the kind of clarity I needed. So I've reread it regularly, and it's almost becoming a mantra for me. But I'll start out. This sounds like this: if you want to be free, take your time. Go slowly. Choose the trade-offs that allow you to do what matters most and release all the rest. Choose your values thoughtfully. Let them guide your choices unwaveringly. Find calm. Find joy in being content with the trade-offs. Allow simplicity to govern your actions, your expectations, your possessions. The simple joys of life are holy. Be fully present and allow the fullness of all that you are to be experienced by others deeply, slowly, as you look for the fullness of beauty within the people around you, deeply and slowly. I'll stop there, but you get the flavor of that. It just happened that morning, I was just keenly aware of what I needed and was able to capture that. That one morning wouldn't have changed the direction of my life. Rereading that and then rehearsing that in my mind over time, that's a step in the right direction.
So Wes, what can it sound like? Give us some examples. So I've done some self-observation, some processing. I realize I need to set a boundary. Give me some language. Give me some examples of how might you do that.
Okay. Here's a few different examples. The first one would be you get ambushed by a spontaneous request. It's not a big deal, but you know it's not in your best interest to do it. So you want to, there's what you want and what you don't want. What you want is to acknowledge that maybe that's a genuine need and you want to acknowledge appreciation for them. What you don't want is to end up accepting what they want you to do. So it might sound something like this. I know that you've got a lot going on right now, but as much as I would like to help, I can't do that and fulfill on the commitments I've already made. Is there something that can be deferred to when you have more time? The second statement is just as important because once I've stood up for my boundaries, I'm tempted to say, is there anything else I could do for you? Or can I help you in the future? Or to offer help? Because I've just said no. My rehearsed way is going to be say, is there some way that you can defer that into the future? I've shown respect, but I've not accepted that responsibility. A common one is a request to attend a meeting that is either not essential or you just don't have time to do. And it could sound like something like this. Thank you for asking me to attend the meeting. Some decisions, some important decisions will certainly be made during that meeting. Unfortunately, I won't be able to fulfill on my other commitments if I attend. And so I'll need to pass this time, period. The ability to stop talking after I've said that is hard for me. That's another discipline to learn.
Yeah, Wes, I'll have to say, I used to over-explain, like give all the background, all the details why, because I hope that the person would agree with me that I should set the boundary and I would get affirmation that it was okay. And so learning not to do that, like that's not necessary.
I want to step in just a little bit here because I'm hearing a similar theme kind of off of this from a lot of people.
Great.
And that is, it's great to be able to have the language to do that. But what if I'm in a culture at my job that if I do that, I will be looked down on. I may not be called a team player. My boss will think I'm not doing my job, or there's a lot of those things around. I don't have a culture where my boss would listen to something like that, or that the culture where I'm working does not really allow for that. And I will be looked lower. I'll be considered less than everyone else. What do you do?
Wes, you want to start on that one?
And also, I'm not in a financial situation where I can just say, I got to get out of here, because for many cases that could probably be the answer, but some folks are not in that position.
Yes. My go-to response, and there's not a lot that we can do, but my go-to response is, if I can leverage compassionate curiosity to try to discover what's driving that culture. Because culture is a collection of everyone, and culture can be changed, but it usually has to change through conversations, not just an event or a directive. And so if I can almost view it as a quest to start having conversations with individuals, not an inquisition, but a truly compassionate based conversation where I'm saying, why is it that we feel this way? Why is it that you feel this way? Are there other alternatives? What are the possibilities? What are we missing when we do this? What are we bringing onto ourselves that we don't want? The questions can go on, but as long as I can frame those from a place of, I'm not resentful of you, but I think we could do better than this. It goes back to what we said at the beginning. I imagine a future where we feel confident in each other's ability to choose what's most important, so that we can get things done better than we're getting them done now, and actually do less, because we're working together as a team and choosing what's most important. But it's that idea of compassionate curiosity where I have conversations, and if others start to discover that we all feel this way, we all want to change, then possibility opens up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have thoughts?
I love that, Wes. And I think I'm sure you're not the only one feeling that way. So finding people you trust to start having those conversations, and think about strategies together, and how do we influence culture, and how might we bring this, knowing you got other people that have your back, bring this to larger conversations, is an opportunity to make some shifts and to think about what that might be. But we hear you. This is not like all of a sudden tomorrow you're going to go in and say no in a culture like that, and it's going to be an immediate change. But I do see, and I do believe cultures can start to shift. And sometimes we have to educate from within in the process. We hear you. It's tough.
I think acknowledging that overcommitment, constant hurry, those are manifestations of fear. And if we can realize that, then the people who are around us that are asking us, the people in our culture of that organization, nobody's bad. We're operating from a place of fear. So what can I do to lead by example, to begin to demonstrate some courage to at least have the conversations, and to point out that we are operating, well, subtly and carefully, but to point out the fact that there's a better way to do things.
Should I move on, or do you have something else you wanted to share on this one?
That's really ultimately it. To be able to recognize it, and then to change those stories that are going on inside of our heads, whether it's through repetition or getting outside input. That's really the heart of it. There are other techniques, but at the heart of it, I have to change the way I'm thinking about myself and others.
Thank you. Well, today we wanted to talk about one other boundary issue, and we don't have a lot of time to do a whole, this could be many, many hours of conversation, but in the nonprofit sector, we don't always talk about the need for boundaries around harassment, around racist comments, sexist comments, homophobic, around microaggressions, around not having negative experiences either with other staff members or with donors. And particularly, I think with donors, there's a sense that they're giving and they're important and they're valuable. And so there's not really an honest conversation about what's acceptable and not acceptable. So I just wanted to take a moment and encourage those of you who are in leadership particularly, and encourage those of you who are wanting to influence culture to have conversations around, what is okay and not okay with donors, right? What do we not have to listen to or not have to be silent around or to have to endure or experience? And, it's not okay to have to go to someone's house when we don't feel comfortable. How do we work with those? And so I was talking to a colleague of mine who's worked in the nonprofit sector for many years as an African-American fundraiser. And for her to have a boss that was open about her own learning, like, oh my gosh, I've said that before, I'm so sorry. Like, owning the fact that you're on a journey as a leader, right? In that process of learning what it's like to be Black in a fundraiser, or a woman in a fundraiser, or gay in a fundraiser, or whatever it is that they might be experiencing, that be on your own journey. And then listen and partner around next steps. So, I have a boss I can go to and say, wow, I just had someone pat me on the head, or I just had someone say, wow, I'm really surprised how well you did that whole presentation, because I'm a Black woman and they're surprised that I have that level of expertise. So those kind of microaggressions and experiences, to be able to go to my boss, go to colleagues, and have a place to be listened to and support in partnership. Do you want me to follow up? What is the solution? And working together to manage that. And then all of us getting training to prepare what to say, and to knowing ahead of time how to handle those things, and knowing that someone has my back as I handle those things is really critical. And I know for women in fundraising, all of us have experienced this. For people of color in fundraising, everyone's experienced it. It's not something that only some people have experienced. I know for men, you've experienced it too at times with with donors. And so I just wanted to take a moment in this conversation to say, we must, as nonprofits, start addressing this straight on, having these honest conversations, and creating a safe environment for all of our folks to work. Retention of our fundraisers is the most critical piece to really work with donors effectively. So what kind of culture are we creating, and what kind of boundaries are we setting for our folks in our organizations? All right, so a few things in conclusion. We want to give a little minute time here for some questions at the end. So let's talk a little bit about this. What are some things you can say to yourself that helps, right? And we'll just kind of review some of these points. So some self-talk. So first of all, getting aware of the talk that keeps me from setting boundaries. And then self-talk is like, I've got my glass here that says, you got this. Being real is better than being resentful. Step by step, I go far. I have things that I say to myself to remind myself, when I see myself going down the path of pleasing, to remember that that's not the most generous thing to do in the world. What are some things for you, Wes?
I think you're nailing it. What I shared earlier, about going slow, I often myself, and the idea that I can tell myself I don't have to explain. I'm a human, and I don't have to explain to you why I cannot fulfill on that. If I'm in a culture that can't honor that, then that's a whole nother conversation. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have to defend every choice when I say I've made commitments that I can't fulfill on if I accept this role.
Yes, you don't have to prove it. Yes, exactly. I liked your piece around creating a pause, like when people come to you with something they're asking, like how do you create that pause and have that language?
Yeah, thank you.
So valuable to have that support, have that person that's really maybe better than you with boundaries. That's what I have in my life. And that I give her a call, and she really helps when I'm feeling fragile or weak or scared, to really kind of reaffirm that that's okay. I am that important, and that is of value. And then having those moments to refine and redefine the boundaries. So sometimes it's just knowing how to say the no or the yes, and that when you say no, you're saying yes to something else. What is it you're wanting to say no and yes to? And then also looking at, how do I maybe renegotiate? And do that in a way that I can more likely be heard, would be really coming with some solutions, right? Coming with a picture of what's going on, coming with what is it that I'm wanting to accomplish with my work, with my donors? What do I have a passion to make happen for donors in my organization? And then, how do I rework what I'm doing to do that more effectively?
Yeah, those are excellent suggestions. I also end up telling myself a lot, a gracious no is much more kind than a halfway yes. And I know that I'm not really going to be able to do a good job for them that simple statement helps me see myself as a better person when I say no than when I say yes and don't fulfill.
Great, thank you. Well, we want to leave some time for questions. Jeff, are there any questions coming up in addition to what you shared earlier that would
Here's
be
a
helpful?
question that came up. This is from a new manager. She says, one person from another department is a strong candidate to join my team next month. She's severely burned out in her current position. I need some advice to help her transition and succeed in her new role.
Wes?
You know, my go-to is always just to start with a compassionate curiosity. You know, not owning someone else's experience, but just saying, not knowing the exact circumstances, to say something like, you know, it's my perception that you have worked so hard that you may have just drained yourself of energy. I would love to know, tell me more about that. You know, tell me what your needs are now. Tell me how a better future, tell me what's the pathway for you to be more productive working on this team, and how can I be a part of that? This idea of terminal or just isolation is that if I can work through that barrier, almost anything's possible when we partner with somebody else.
Here's a question. I want to know, how do you start setting boundaries with donors or your bosses, like not taking phone calls or checking email on weekends, but still feel part of the team?
So what I'm wondering is the real issue how you feel? Maybe there's a trade-off there. That would be the case for me, as I've tried to do that. You can set up mechanisms for communication where you you check in with somebody who still hasn't made that choice. But the question is, what's the trade-off?
One thing that comes to mind, I mean, you may not be able to go all the way to I'm not going to do emails on weekends. Maybe a start would be, you know, time with family and time to regroup and be present is really valuable for me to be successful in my work. So what I'd like to do is I will check emails, you know, on Sunday at 5 p.m. and make sure that I've responded to folks before the week, or maybe it's once each day. I don't know what your requirements are or how much pressure there is. So at least start narrowing some of those times, right? So that people know if there's a lot of critical stuff, you've checked that there's anything critical, you're going to get back to it. But other than that, you're going to address everything on Monday because you want to really be fresh and ready to do your work well.
Here's one. How do I create boundaries in board meetings? I'm receiving some challenging feedback and demands from certain members during meetings, working with my board chair, but wondering if there is something else I can do in terms of setting ground rules for discussions.
You know, my first thought is, if you're not the boss, to partner with the boss in developing a strategy for that, where you develop a go-to response is, okay, you know, if they're putting me on the spot, maybe my boss can step up and say, you know, we're juggling several priorities. Give us some time to think about that and see where we can fit that in. But I think partnering with other team members, or especially a boss, in that view would be really valuable.
Yep. Those are the questions I have.
Well, my alarm is reminding me that our hour is up anyway. And
oh, it is up. Well, I wanted to just put a slide up here for you all really quickly. As you could see, Wes, I've worked with Wes for over 10 years in different capacities. He is an incredible coach, kind, beautiful human being. So if you do want to follow up with Wes with any further questions or interest in coaching or whatever, here his information for you, which is available. So get that down really quickly. It'll be in the recording as well. I also want to let you know upcoming Veritus webinars.
Yeah.
You want to speak to that, Jeff?
Sure, yeah. If you're interested in learning more about what we have to offer here at Veritus, we'd like to invite you to join us for an upcoming webinar. And you can do that. You can find all our webinars and sign up at veritusgroup.com/webinars. Go to that, and you'll go to a web page that'll list all of our webinars that we have coming up. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And as a reminder, you'll receive a recording of this webinar and the self-compassion worksheet later today. So, but before we sign off, I want to ask both Karen and Wes just to share one little nugget. I know we're a little over time that you can take away from this session. So Wes and Karen, one little nugget.
Okay, my nugget is have a sense of humor about yourself. So when you see yourself not doing well, have a sense of humor, chuckle at yourself, and then see what other choices you might have. Be kind.
I like
Wes?
that. And as someone who has been labeled as suffering from terminal niceness, in the past, genuinely so, I would say explore how empowering and rewarding it is to reframe what it means to be good to other people.
Good job. Nice.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you, Wes.
thank you both. You guys were awesome today. We need to do a big course on this, I think. I want to thank everyone who wrote in comments and questions. We didn't get to all of them, but the fact that you wrote them out and named those things are really important. So I want to thank you for doing that. And thanks for joining us. I hope we'll see you on an upcoming webinar from Veritus Group, and take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure.